Hola a todos, es un gusto siempre darte la bienvenida a este espacio. Soy Dani Mora, quien te ha venido acompañando en este proyecto sobre terapia Gestalt con perspectiva de campo. Hoy traigo para ustedes una entrevista que lleva por título Enfoque de Terapia Gestalt para las Adaptaciones Esquizoides. Nos va a estar acompañando desde Estados Unidos Elinor Greenberg. Ella es psicóloga, consultora, autora y formadora en terapia Gestalt de renombre internacional, especializada en el diagnóstico y tratamiento de adaptaciones límites, narcisistas y esquizoides. Forma parte del profesorado del Instituto de Terapia Gestalt de Nueva York y del Centro Gestalt de Psicoterapia y Formación, donde ha desarrollado e imparte un curso sobre trastornos de personalidad. Es editora asociada del Gestalt Review. Ha formado a terapeutas en Estados Unidos, Canadá, Inglaterra, Sicilia, Suecia, Noruega, Serbia, Rusia, Malta, México, entre otros países. Ha recibido 2 premios Quora Top Writer por sus publicaciones sobre adaptaciones de la personalidad y es autora del blog en línea Comprender el narcisismo. Sus artículos han sido republicados en línea por Forbes, Business Insider, Newsweek, Apple News, Yutango y The Minds Journal. Es autora del libro Adaptaciones límite, narcisistas y esquizoides, la búsqueda del amor, la admiración y la seguridad. Una introducción fácil de entender al diagnóstico y tratamiento de los trastornos de personalidad, también disponible en alemán. Entonces vamos a dar una vuelta sobre las adaptaciones esquizoides y por supuesto los trastornos de personalidad. Espero puedan disfrutar de esta entrevista creada con mucho esfuerzo y mucho cariño para todos ustedes. Qué honor tan grande tenerla acá. Es un placer para mí poder compartir un poco de lo que usted ha venido estudiando durante todo este tiempo, así que bienvenida a este espacio. ¿Cómo se encuentra?
So I'm fine and I'm really happy to be here. It's an honor for me to be asked and invited. And I like novelty. I love meeting new people. I love meeting people from different places and getting my latest workout when possible. And just this, I love it. So I'm happy. I'm happy. Thank you for waiting for me. I wanted to do it before, but I wasn't free to do it. So thank you for waiting.
Ok, qué maravilla tenerla acá, sobre todo para hablar del tema que nos convoca, que es enfoque de terapia Gestalt para las adaptaciones esquizoides. Qué maravilla. Entonces, comencemos con la primera pregunta. Bien, ¿cómo surgió su interés para el diagnóstico y tratamiento de las adaptaciones límites, narcisistas y esquizoides?
From my failures. In my first year of doing therapy, I had trained as a Gestalt therapist starting in 1972, alongside when I started my master's degree at the same time. And I continued on when I was getting my PhD. On about the second year of training, my then teacher offered me, I had done a number of trainings, but one teacher said, well, tell me when you feel ready to take clients. So I'm going, yeah, of course. No, I'm excited. And when I eventually, that all went well. I was supervised, what have you. So my first year in full practice, I expected it to be like training group or like my supervised clients. I don't have any problem usually putting the word out. I'm not an advertiser. I kind of put the word out to my friends I'm in practice or to people who are interested. And so I had clients my first year, and some of them were just what I expected. They had problems. You could do standard Gestalt therapy with them. They had insights, or they didn't, and they quit and they didn't like the therapy. I'm a new therapist. I didn't expect to know everything, but I was very excited. And I was only charging my first year $15 a session. Okay. So then I raised it when I got more confident to $25. And then, so, people knew I was new. I told everybody. So things went fine for a while. And then I took in some clients who looked just like my other clients. They didn't look any more distressed, disturbed, unusual. Now I have a low bar. And my family, both sides of my family, had different mental health challenges. And they were all really functional, though. And they were all really nice. So I think that set me up for not being particularly judgmental about mental health issues, because I saw them do so well in life and I knew they were crazy on both sides. And I knew every anxiety. So then I'm in a few sessions with this person and they love me. They tell me how great the therapy is going. It's transforming their life. I'm sure you've all heard things like this. And then I come in and I don't know what I said or what I did or why. The person did a 180 and now they hated me. Now I was the worst therapist in the world. I was a stupid, uncaring, unprofessional bitch. And they ran screaming from the room, cursing me. I'm allowed to curse on screen? So I'm standing there shocked. Well, I'm sitting there shocked, but I'm kind of standing there shocked. I don't know what happened. But hey, worse has happened in my life than somebody doing that. So I shrugged. I said, well, I must have missed something. I must have said something. I'm a new therapist. This is probably never going to happen again. I mean, I've never even heard of this happening at that point. None of my trainers had discussed this as a possible issue, that somebody starts out liking you very much and within one session decides they hate you and that you're awful. It just hadn't come up in any of my trainings. I did theory on Pearls, Heffeline, and Goodman with Isidore Fromm. We addressed lots of issues. I trained intermittently before then with Robert Resnick, who you may know of, was the late wonderful guy, but he was in California, so I couldn't do that much training. So I had lots of training in Gestalt therapy, and nobody had ever mentioned this. So I say, okay, well, I'm going to continue. So I continue on. I still don't know what's going on. And it happens to me again with another client. Almost the same thing. Everything's fine till the day it isn't fine. And they don't want to stop and explain. They don't want to tell me, what did you do? Of course, I'm very open and I'm ready to make a repair of any kind. I'm ready to utilize what happened. I'm suggesting we utilize it. This is Gestalt therapy, everything that happens. Let's explore. Let's consider it an experiment. You loved me. You thought I was great, but now you hate me. Are you willing to explore this a little bit? No. These clients not willing to explore, gone. So I'm beginning to get worried. This is 1 year, two of the people. Now I'm in New York City, which I later found out was the land for narcissistic personality disorders, all sorts of personality disorders. People come to New York, to the Big Apple, because they want to make it big. And it was also a place where schizoid clients came, which I'll be talking about, because they could have privacy yet contact, because it's a super urban environment. I don't know if you've ever been to New York, but there's people everywhere. So you're never alone till you want to be alone. And there's a lot of one-room apartment studios, they're called, 1.5 rooms with a bathroom. So there was a lot of, I didn't realize at the time, schizoid people in New York. And there were some borderline people who usually had to leave eventually, unless they were very wealthy, because they had to be very functional to live in New York. So I don't know all of this yet, but I realize I'm in trouble. There's something going on. And when I talk to my friends who are therapists, they laugh it off. They just say, this is therapy. You win some, you lose some. But I felt like this was a pattern. I'm very good at pattern recognition. This is my strength. I can connect the dots. You give me 3 dots, I'm not, I'm off in a direction. So I could see I got a third person. I said, I have to hire a supervisor. Luckily, I had a good supervisor I was paying. I went back to Betsy Mintz, Dr. Elizabeth Mintz. And I said, Betsy, and I told her what was going on. And I said, what's the diagnosis? I'm a Gestalt therapist. In my PhD program, we were trained in diagnosis, but we weren't trained in diagnosis as in psychotherapy as a Gestalt therapist. And I was not trained in any diagnoses in my programs that fit this. I'd never heard of this before. So Betsy goes to me now. Betsy's funny and brilliant at the same time. She was very unusual. She had a supervisory group in which she supervised analysts, psychoanalytic trainees, and Gestalt therapists simultaneously, and would just translate. So that's why I went to Betsy, because I knew if someone knew, it would probably be Betsy. She goes, Elinor, I have very bad news for you. Sit down. I have something to tell you. Now I'm scared. I've never seen Betsy be this serious. I mean, she's funny, she's brilliant, but serious, no one ever described Betsy Mintz as serious in that quite that way. So I sit down. She says, you're going to have to study with the analysts. And then in silence. I said, what do you mean? She says, I think what you're dealing with is what we used to. Betsy was older than me. And now I'm 80. So back in 74, I'm not very old. I'm born in 45. And she says, well, we used to call it character disorders. Character disorders. I think they're calling it personality disorders now. So I said, well, Betsy, if I wanted to study it, who would I study with? What would I read? She says, I really haven't kept up with it because nobody has been successful. There's not that much material. And in Gestalt world, nobody is talking about diagnosis and nobody's talking about these things. That's why I'm saying, if you're interested, you're going to have to read the analysts, and you're not going to understand anything they're saying because they're very obtuse and obscure, and it's a very different language and it's much less straightforward than what you're used to in Gestalt therapy. And that was hard enough to learn with Pearls, Hefferlein, and Goodman and all this stuff. So I said, but I really feel like I have to learn it. I don't have a choice here. I mean, I cannot fail this often as a therapist and not understand why. So I'm curious, and I'm willing to do the work. I didn't even know where to start. So she started me off with reading ego psychology, which Gertrude and Ruben Blank. I wrote Ego Psychology 1 and 2. It was really hard, and it didn't do me any good. And I started taking classes around town while I'm working as a Gestalt therapist, while I'm married, while we're trying to pay off mortgages, while I'm newly, graduated with a PhD, a husband, while I had babies and no money. So I'm in this situation where I want badly to learn something, and there's only hard and expensive ways to learn it. I bought a psychoanalytic dictionary to read the psychoanalytic books with because I didn't understand the language. Well, to make a long story short, I took classes throughout New York. I took classes. I didn't even understand what they were saying. I didn't understand what diagnosis. I thought I walked into the wrong room. And then I took classes with people talking about things like borderline personality disorder, but what they were saying was either too obscure or too obvious. So long story short, in the end, I ended up flying back and forth to Harvard. My long-suffering husband, God bless him, I owed him big time. So I was willing to do almost anything. I'm flying to Harvard because I figure they know in Harvard what's going on. And there were lots of conferences on personality disorders. And so eventually, long story short, I tried to learn it on my own. I tried to learn it with a class here and there. I tried to learn it in continuing ed. It was taking me years. So I ended up studying. I said, well, look, my main problem is when I'm reading these books, I truly don't and I go to these classes. Where is the line between just having some personality disorder traits and having a personality disorder? If I can just start with that, because I had just read this book by this guy, David somebody, who was talking about neurotic styles. And the book seemed to be talking about personality disorders. So I really didn't know the difference. What's a style? What's a trait? What's a disorder? We don't talk about this in Gestalt therapy training. And in psych training, we learn how to do research. I'm really good at research and reading obscure things. So long story short, I ended up at the Masterson Institute, but I made myself a vow. It was so hard. I spent 10 years there after taking lots of classes and up and down wherever. And I said, I am not going to be afraid. You're going to hear what I mean by this. I'm still a student in my mind and not a new Gestalt therapist. I've been studying it for 7 years, but certainly I'm not one of the top Gestalt therapists in the land, but I made a vow. I said, I don't think anybody but me is willing to do this. And I think I'm going to take a lot of flack for telling people what I'm doing. But it is really important to me. I believe we're being led down a garden path in Gestalt therapy that I'm not going to continue on. I was told diagnosing clients is unnecessary and pathologizing, and we should avoid it, and there's no need to learn it. I was also taught that I was not being taught about transference because we as Gestalt therapists, I said, why not? Obviously, there's transference going on. They said, we dissolve it in each session because we're egalitarian. I said, really? It doesn't seem to be working for me. Maybe the best therapists and the most expensive therapists don't need to know diagnosis. Maybe they're so good, which I am not, them, that this is all abundantly clear how to proceed. But I am failing with these clients, and that's unacceptable. So I don't imagine, I'm a member of Mensa. I'm in the top 1% in the world in IQ, measurable by Mensa's terms. I have a bachelor's, a master's, and a PhD in psychology. I passed the state licensing exam in psychology, and I don't understand it. And I didn't understand it, and I wasn't well prepared. I love Gestalt therapy. I'm a Gestalt therapist. But I'm biting the bullet, making a solemn vow that I'm going to go to conferences as I am, with as little I know, and just teach what I know at these conferences. So other people know, A, this exists. If they know nothing else, they will learn what I have learned. This is the name for it. This is the difference between someone with traits, someone with a personality disorder. And this was before we needed this for insurance. Now people have to learn it. But then in New York City, you didn't have to be licensed as anything to practice. People were training in Gestalt therapy, and we welcomed them into the New York Institute to train from other fields. So, they started as opera singers, as massage therapists. Dan Blooms was a lawyer. Susan Gregory was an opera singer and taught singing. So we certainly, we had a very different view. And so I did this. And that's what started me. And I would go to the conference, and at every conference, every presentation I made, people would be extremely grateful, but it would always start with a challenge. You're a Gestalt therapist. Why are you diagnosing? And I'd say something really simple. When I'm at a dance and someone comes up to me and they ask me to dance, I like to know if I'm going to be expected to waltz or do a cha-cha or freestyle. And nobody objects to me knowing that ahead of time. So when I see a client, I see no harm in getting oriented about the pattern of behavior and sensitivities and coping skills and defenses that I'm going to be facing. And why should I cause more distress than necessary for me or the client by bumbling around and spending lots of their money discovering what I can know before I start the session, or after a few sessions if the person's not coming to me to diagnose. So that was my life. And at a certain point.
Ok, a ver, es súper interesante toda esta historia porque nos da mucho contexto. Ahora, En su libro plantea un modelo accesible para comprender las adaptaciones de la personalidad. ¿Podría explicar cómo la terapia Gestalt concibe los trastornos de personalidad y cuáles son los principales desafíos al diagnosticar estas adaptaciones sin patologizar a la persona?
I'm not sure I can tell you what I developed. When I started, I had an object relations approach as a theoretical basis, basically James F. Masterson's. And are we talking about schizoid only, or do you want me to talk generally about personality disorder and Gestalt diagnosis?
General.
Doesn't matter. What do you prefer?
Now general, next we can
Okay.
go.
So after, what I would do is I would translate. I became bilingual. I spoke analytic, I spoke object relations, and I spoke Gestalt therapy. Now, this is really terrible if you think about it. You're a Gestalt therapist. You know how many times you have had to explain to people what is Gestalt therapy? So now I had two therapies that I couldn't explain very well, that nobody understood. What is object relations? So I'm translating from object relations language at these conferences. I explain this as object relations, but as a Gestalt therapist, I had to think of how do we adapt this to ourselves. I went with Masterson because it was a real crossover. He was present-centered, very much so. And he hated Gestalt therapy without knowing what it was, because he was kind of snobby that way. He was an analyst, he was a psychiatrist. We never say mother until the client says mother. So, he let them unwind and, he wasn't interfering. So eventually, I was in the same office for over 40 years. I loved my office. That was a dream come true. And I could set it up any way I wanted. My office was 19 and a half by 19 and a half feet. How I made it into like an English library, velvet sofas, a wall of books, 14-foot ceiling. I had a wall for my narcissists of all my diplomas and certifications facing them. I had little toys. I made the windows large. Nothing looked like medical. It was all very, very comfortable and things like that. And for 40 years, I got to watch people come in who didn't know me and enter the office and talk to me. And I'd offer them a chair, and there were many chairs. I'd say, I'm sitting here, and I'd point out my chair. And there was a velvet sofa to my right. There were comfy chairs. There was a rocking chair. There was maybe 5 other seats in the room. There was 4 seats, and there was lots of extra pillows. I would say, make yourself comfortable, choose your seat where you're comfortable, and I will be sitting here. And then I would watch with it. I would say, you can move the chairs, you can change pillows, make yourself comfortable. Now, I gave everyone pretty much the same introduction. I'm here, dot. You can choose. And then for 40 years, I watched what they did next. And it turned out after about 30 years of observation, I realized I could diagnose by how they reacted in the first session, what they made figure and what they made ground in this interpersonal field. And a light bulb went off, and I said, oh, the analysts are making it way too complicated. I can use their stuff. It's great stuff. But Gestalt therapists, we already knew figure ground. And I could just use simple figure ground theory and simple field theory. And I had pretty much as accurate a diagnosis. Now, I'll give you an example. When I asked, and I called this, I expanded this into a concept that I first wrote up for one of the early Sicily conferences that the New York Institute was invited for, and I presented it as a paper. But I invented something I called the interpersonal Gestalt. What do people make figure repeatedly? What pattern do they see when they look at another human being at the contact boundary? Now I'm in solid Gestalt land here. I've got contact boundary, I've got field theory, I've got figure ground theory. So I said, every Gestalt therapist, this will be much, much simpler for them. And so then I looked at, so you could do this with each of the personality disorders. And then I made it even simpler. I wrote a paper. My paper was called Love, Admiration, or Safety: A Gestalt Therapy Approach to the Diagnosis of Personality Disorders. And I will tell you the simplest way to make this diagnosis with yourself. Now, you're not going to know whether you really have a personality disorder, but by going along here, you'll find you have an affinity to either borderline, narcissist, or schizoid, somewhat more than the others. So if you want to know, just do this little simple, non-validated quiz. If you had to choose from these things in order what you had to have to be in this relationship with another person, a romantic relationship or a very intimate relationship, and you're going to want all three of these things. Most people do. And you can do this, Danny, and my translator, yourself, and the people listening. Put these in order. Love. Love includes romantic love, nurturing, caretaking. Admiration. Admiration is short for I look up, the people look up to me, they respect me, they want to hear what I say, they think I'm very important and what I say is very important. So that's under admiration. Do you need to have admiration from the other person before you trust them, before you let down your guard, before you're comfortable? Or interpersonal safety. Do you have to feel like this is a very safe person and no harm can come to you emotionally or physically from speaking with them? So take a moment and think about this. When I started, I'll be brave and tell you mine. So if you tell me mine, maybe some of you will be brave enough to do this and tell other people. Mine was love, admiration, and safety. I wasn't really that concerned with safety. Safety is not one of my prominent concerns. I'm more aware of it now that I'm 80. And even though I'm in good health, my body is so much more fragile. I have to watch what I do. Bumps into me, recovery time when you're old, it's different. But I was never afraid of people the way some people are. I like strangers. I'm warm, I'm friendly. So mine first was love, which meant a sense of strong connection also. Admiration. If a person doesn't respect me, I'm going to lose interest in them. I'm going to think they're stupid. So take it for what you want. But I don't do well with people. You don't want to respect me, go away. I don't care. If I cared a lot, I would have never been able to do this work, because I work with people who come in and sometimes they're very hostile. And having to tell people that I was a Gestalt therapist diagnosing, if I was worried about being respected, that could blow it all. So safety was last on my list. Love was first. Admiration was in the middle. Now, how do you see this with people? You could ask them directly just to give this. This is now an experiment I use. I used it in workshops. I used it the first time I talked about the interpersonal Gestalt. The interpersonal Gestalt is really a process. We are a process-oriented therapy. It's the ongoing process of how a person chooses what to respond to in the other person, how they respond to them. Peter Phillipson would say our self is made at the contact boundary. I don't believe that. I say parts of myself are evoked at the contact boundary, but I feel very me when I'm not with anybody else also. So, but it's an interesting phenomenon. And other people will disagree with the contact withdrawal cycle. Gestalt therapy, it's Gestalt. So it's a process. And as you attend to that process with another human being, and as you engage in the process, you will notice that some people repeat the same pattern no matter who they're with or no matter what the circumstances. So they have an inflexible, rather fixed, interpersonal Gestalt. Now, what I found out, if they're not psychotic or neurologically impaired, that fixed Gestalt that dates back till childhood and is being enacted, whether it's useful or not with everybody, or whether it's suitable or not with everybody, is what the personality disorder, or as I call them, personality adaptations, fits into. So look for a fixed gestalt, an interpersonal gestalt. Then you can do your differential diagnosis by what is figural to them. My borderline clients, everything to do with love or contrastly abandonment, rejection, they either felt on one side, everything was either all good or all bad in object relations, splitting. That's another way of defining personality disorders. There's a lack of whole object relations, a lack of object constancy, which meant a person cannot form an integrated, realistic figure that is stable of themselves with a stable identity, or of the other person that contains both liked and disliked aspects of the self simultaneously. So to have a personality disorder, you cannot do that. You see people as all bad or as all good. After a bit, you can see that the borderline clients came in and they either made the all good mother part of me projected onto me, figural, my warm smile, my willingness to be friendly, we've made it an easy projection. Some of them projected the abandoning mother onto me, which is kind of like hard to project that onto. You really have to have a strong transference, but they have. And they felt like they're ugly and they're going to be abandoned by me. And I'm just, because people pick up the ball where they left off in childhood. So if they left off having an unfinished situation, we know in Gestalt therapy, unfinished situations from the past can press for fulfillment in the present. So we can, what the analysts are calling transference, we can just consider a creative adaptation in which the current situation is being used in an attempt unconsciously to go back to an unfinished situation in the past that's holding you back and finish it in the present. So that's how I'm defining transference and what was projected onto me. So anyway, and I don't want to go, I could do this for days. I'll go straight here to schizoid. After a while, I noticed something very interesting. I could diagnose schizoid from where they decided to sit, almost, right from the beginning. And from a couple of exercises. My schizoid clients, when I would say, I'm sitting here, where would you like to sit? They would go either, where do you want me to sit? And do that. They would treat me like I was dominating. They would give over dominance immediately. Or if they were high functioning, they would be a bit more normal seeming. But with one man, he came in, this was the days when men wore suits to work. He was a young man. He's wearing a 3-piece suit. He's a lawyer. And he's very high functioning because he got through all of that. And I don't know his diagnosis, but I knew it in 2 minutes when he said this to me. I caught a little smile, like a half smile that quickly went away when I asked him, where would you like to sit? It was like a rueful smile, And I said, no, what? Tell me. I didn't know to be cautious then. He says, do you really want to know where I'd like to sit? I said, yes. He says, I'd like, the hallway. I'd like you to open the door to the hallway, and I'd like to sit at the other end of the hall as far from you as possible. Now, what's foreground here? Love, admiration, or safety? Very quickly, we've got safety. This is not math. This doesn't have to be rocket science. Yes, there are people who are hard to diagnose, but not if you know what you're looking for. So I had another client. Give you a different schizoid client comes in. I don't know the guy's schizoid. I never met the man. Calls me. They have referral. They're referred from former clients. Well, this is before the internet. I mean, I was not public. I did not advertise. It was word of mouth. Your physician referred you, your therapist referred you, or another client referred you, or a therapist who hated me referred you. Sometimes. That's a therapy joke. And so this guy comes in, and I do the same thing. Hi, I'm Elinor Greenberg. Welcome. I'm going to be sitting here. Why don't you choose a seat? Now, they got 19 by 19 feet of seating in this room. So this guy chooses one not to my left, ahead of me, and facing away from me, facing my fireplace. He can't see me. So I'm thinking, this is already interesting. What's going on? So I ask him, I'm a little curious here before we begin. I have a question. Do you mind me asking? He says, no. What do you want to know? I said, how did you happen to choose that seat? He doesn't even look like he understands what I'm saying. I said, you're facing, so I went on. I said, you can't really see me without turning your head a lot, and you're facing the fireplace. Why did you choose that seat instead of one of the others? He says it was the first seat I saw. I didn't think it mattered. Now, what I later learned in life was that he didn't think anything mattered. He had never developed interests. He was very obedient to a degree. So when I said, take a seat, he took the first seat he saw. It was more important to follow my orders and then to think about what he might like. In fact, he didn't know what he liked in the world. He came from a wealthy family. He collected car magazines and cars. That was the only thing I knew about. And he had a very undeveloped sense of self. And he didn't know that he could negotiate differences with other people. So he solved his problem by doing what other people wanted him to do, except when he wasn't thinking about cars. So now we have a different kind of schizoid than the guy who can tell me with a laugh, I want to sit in the hallway as far from you as possible. We're as far apart and functioning as we can get and still have them be somewhat same income bracket, except one got himself very educated and the other guy didn't. I don't know that he finished college. And they both turned out to have the same diagnosis. Another client comes in. I already had his diagnosis at this point, but it'll give you an idea of how to use this as diagnosis. I wasn't sure because I'm a Gestalt therapist. I don't start out diagnosing people. And if someone's sent to me with a diagnosis, I certainly don't trust it because most people never went to the trouble I did to learn how to diagnose personality disorders. So the only people that correctly gave anyone a schizoid diagnosis was my schizoid clients who self-diagnosed and came to me, my first schizoid client, saying, I am a schizoid. I said, oh, tell me about what that means to you. And they told me. And I said, well, I've never learned to, at that time I had to say, I don't know how to treat schizoid personality disorder. I'm going to have to refer you out. I'm not trained to do it. And I did. And I used to refer him to the Massachusetts Institute till somebody finally said to me, listen, I want you as a therapist, and I will teach you how to be a therapist for a schizoid if you will read books and be open. And I said, what do you want me to read? And they named this dude Matsid Khan first. I had never heard of him, some obscure analyst to me. And then there was a series of obscure analytic books on schizoid, which I barely could understand. These people were so deep. And I am quite shallow and very broad and abstract and pattern recognition. And they're talking about the depths of existential pain. I'm not even understanding them. So the thing that I was going to say about my office, now I'm doing things remotely, so I don't have the same ability to diagnose by office, but I'm just trying to get across how easy it is if you pay attention to what's coming towards you. So what does the person notice in session with you? If they're schizoid, they're going to notice, took some notes. They're going to be looking for signs of interpersonal safety or the lack of it. It's as simple as that. I'll do basic figure ground theory here. Let me do a couple of minutes digression to bring everybody up to date. When I'm talking about figure ground, I'm really talking about biology, neurophysiology. Our brain and our senses are limited. We can only hold a certain amount of ideas in our consciousness at a time. There's only so much we can process about a person or even notice that we're sitting opposite or that we're working with. So our brain is automatically programmed. And this was Gestalt psychology before Gestalt therapy. The brain has to limit and decide, what are we going to program to notice and what are we going to ignore? How is that decision made? Well, to some degree, it's made biologically, which we know from the Gestalt psychology theory, when they were looking to understand human perception and what are the rules that make us see something as connected. But basically, our brain seems to pay attention to our mind. What we want makes figural. What we want at any point, what we fear, or what has traumatized us in the past. And of course, needs, like biological needs or anything that becomes an emerging need. And normally, as I said, this is a process that shifts. We have a whole theory of, contact withdrawal cycle. Something becomes bright and shiny and interesting to us, and we pay attention to us because we're programmed to pay attention to what we like. Okay? So all our brains, will allow us to see our favorite things. And all our brains want us to avoid things that can harm us, that we're afraid, and assumes that what we're afraid of will harm us. And all of us have had maybe some of us were bullied in the past, so we'll notice bullying. Some of us, we all have different situations. So we have trauma from the past that's going to be on our alert list. And that's what the brain will do. So they come into your office we each come in with a rather flexible programming. However, the personality disorder client comes in with an inflexible program that is meant to deal with their early trauma and their early unmet needs and to keep them safe. And that's what they're going to be enacting with you. They're going to be enacting their safety needs. So they're going to be evaluating you as you speak for whether you're dominating, domineering, dangerous. Do you take up all the air in the room? Are you going to intrude upon them? Are you going to take away what is theirs? Are you going to put words in their mouth? Are you going to be demanding? Demanding is scary. Are you going to be pushy? Are you going to try and make them reveal things that are deeply private? So you got a worried person. There is no schizoid on earth that I've met that doesn't come into therapy worried, okay, with a projection of concern. They all come in, from my experience and from my teacher's experience, concerned, but understanding that they have a problem that they've diagnosed for the most part. Not everybody reaches a diagnosis. I'm seeing more people now since the internet that reach the wrong diagnosis, because the differential for them is between autism, Asperger's, high functioning autism and schizoid and some other things. And most people cannot do a differential between schizoid and schizotypal. I can. I've had schizotypal and I've had schizoid. And there's also what I call schizoid plus to be alert for. Schizoid plus is the person has something else going on, some twist in the wiring in their brain where they're not. With normal schizoid personality disorder and the types of therapy that I do, which is adapting Gestalt therapy to the needs. Once I realize the adaptation is, once I realize someone is likely to be schizoid, I go back to being very cautious, non-intrusive, and there's a list of rules that I keep in mind. We don't have time to share everything today. I'd be happy sometime to do a short workshop on how do you treat schizoid, how do you do this. But from a Gestalt therapy point of view, my advice is we, thank God, are trained to observe the client and adapt. We are taught However, so that's going to work really well. You're going to adapt. But you don't realize, I didn't realize, my trainees don't realize, I'm assuming you don't realize, that some of the things that work for normal people are just not going to be right, not going to be the adaptive thing to do with a schizoid client. My narcissistic clients want me to mind read. They want me to be on the same page with them and in total agreement. My schizoid clients don't want mind reading. That's frightening to them. They have porous boundaries. They can't keep hold of their own diet. They want me to keep separate and not to tell them about themselves. I'm not allowed to tell them I think I know about how them, and I'm not allowed to insist on making contact with them. This can be quite far. I had a man, a physician. I'm only saying that because, he's high functioning. He's married, but you're going to be shocked. He was my first and only histrionic schizoid. I heard that existed. I didn't know. This guy sat as far from me as he could in the room. And I had the weird feeling that I wasn't supposed to look through at him directly. This is without words. We're communicating now without words. It's schizoid land. Okay, we're in schizoid land. There's a lot of things that are going between us, a lot of weird transferences, stuff, messages, and it's not being verbalized. But I'm picking up on it. I'm good at picking up on energy. So I pick up that I'm not supposed to look at him directly, and I'm not supposed to look past the center of the room. That means I have to stop my gaze at about 7 feet based on where I'm sitting and he's sitting. But I'm a little irritated by that and I want to test it. So I look him. Now, we've never spoken about this distance thing, this gaze thing, or not on the table. Never had a word. He's told me about his marital problems up till now and his other schizoid problems, but nothing. So I look at him and he becomes furious. He starts screaming at me. Now, he's histrionic. He's bigger than life. People think of the typical schizoid as being very poetical. What kind of poetry would a schizoid write? Haikus, very delicate. This guy isn't delicate. He's standing there screaming at me. I said, why are you screaming at me? He says, I am screaming at you. I said, have you ever told me? No, I don't have to tell you. You know it perfectly well, and I know you know it perfectly well. He was right. I knew, he knew, he knew, I knew. I said, well, let me say it out loud so that I don't think I'm crazy, okay? I think I wasn't supposed, I want you to say it to me. No, I didn't say it. This is a long time ago. I wanted him to say it to me because I really wanted to confirm, I'm thinking, I'm not a psychic. How do I know this even? I don't know how I know it, but so I knew it was possible, but I didn't think of myself that way. He said, you're not allowed to look past halfway to me in the room. You have your half, I have my half. Okay, love, admiration, or safety. What are we dealing with now? You're the diagnostician. Is this so hard? We're talking about safety, interpersonal safety. We're arguing about how far apart we're going to sit and how far apart we're allowed to gaze. So through Gestalt therapy methods, through the projections onto the therapist, if they project that I'm going to be intrusive and take away their power, I'm in schizoid land. If they project that I'm going to be their admiring audience, or I want them as my admiring audience, we're in narcissistic land. I'm just being oversimple. If they want me to be their loving mother while they can be the child and please me, or else I'm their bitch of an abandoning mother who they hate, we're in borderline land. We're talking about love and hate. In narcissist land, we're talking about achievement and status and respect. In schizoid land, all we're really talking about is interpersonal safety. And their damage was done earlier. And the basic issue is basic trust is missing.
Mm,
The caretaker, for whatever reason, did not meet the needs for this person to be seen and adapted to, feeling loved and safe and held in a reliable way. Lots of
mm,
things go wrong. Everything from foster care to a sick mother. It doesn't mean people were mean, but some of my clients knew a lot of abuse. Commonly, I had abused, neglected, and intruded upon clients. So, look, you hear a person presents their mother in therapy and they tell you that she's an awful person. If they, if they say this about her, we're in schizoid land. It's not hard to think. She didn't give me any privacy. She took the door off the bathroom because she didn't want me, because I kept locking it so she couldn't come in when I was urinating or showering. What land are we in? Are we in borderline land about love? Are we in narcissism land about status? Or are we in schizoid land about interpersonal safety? Did this boy feel interpersonally safe with his mother? Did what he wanted matter? No, when I asked him how she justified coming in and out of the bathroom while he's a male teenager, she says, I've seen what you have. I diapered you. And she refused to understand the difference between diapering a new baby, a 3-month-old, and walking in on an 18-year-old boy, young man.
mm.
Okay, so his mother's a narcissist and he's a schizoid. So that's what I'm doing.
Ok. A ver, habrá muchas preguntas que me quedarán pendientes con toda esa explicación que nos puede compartir, pero tengo una que sí es necesaria y es, desde su perspectiva sobre el desarrollo del self, ¿cómo se originan las dificultades de contacto en las adaptaciones esquizoides?
I adapt first because they have a personality disorder, what I and which was an adaptation to an early situation before the age of 4. And that adaptation, by the schizoids, by the time they're 7, most of them have decided that the smart ones, no one's on my side, no one will take care of me, I'm in it on my own, I'm going to save my money, I'm going to get out of here as soon as possible, I'm going to be independent, I'm never going to depend on another person. So one of the first things I keep in mind, about 7 things that schizoids hate. I keep them in mind. They hate to be, they're going to feel that who's ever has the most power calls all the shots. So I have to be really careful. I can't expect them to stand up for themselves. So you, as a Gestalt therapist, I know they're going to be very iffy around eye contact. So I have to adapt. I have to adapt and control my eye contact. I may want to stare at them like a loony, and think about what they're saying, but no, I really have to be cautious. And I could go on, but Ralph Klein, a psychiatrist who taught schizoid at the Masterson Institute, he was the one that introduced it to Masterson and reframed it in James F. Masterson's developmental self and object relations theoretical point of view. He taught us a really good tip that's easy. He says, you have to speak schizoid. I said, what do you mean? He says, it's a very simple language. You can say anything you want to a schizoid person as long as you label it as your thought and you go like this. Now I'm going to answer your question as if you were schizoid, Danny, okay? It's okay. And I'll be Ralph. I'm going to look away from you. Then I'm going to talk slowly. Danny, I was thinking this week, I had a thought about something you might want me to talk about today. I was wondering if you'd be interested in hearing it. And then I pause and wait for that person. If they don't look like give me a yes, I don't continue. That's a no. If they nod their head to me and say, I am interested, I say, well, It's just my thinking, but I was curious. I had a thought that today we really wouldn't have time to go into everything that you would want to know about schizoid, because I've done this a lot, and it usually takes 3 hours to cover everything minimally and 2 hours just to answer most of the questions. But I didn't want to contact you because it's your show, and I figured you'd have a way to deal with this. And I respect you as a leader. What do you think? Did I do the right thing, or would you have preferred something else? Then I wait. No demand. No assumption. Now, I'll tell you why this is so powerful. First of all, it gets me on the same page as the person, and it slows the whole thing down. It gives them choices. I'm teaching them indirectly they have choices here. I'm moving them from an I-it relationship that they used to a Martin Buber I-thou relationship, where they call shots as much as me. I propose this, but I'm waiting for them. So all this is done without announcing I'm doing it. I'm just doing it, but I'm explaining it. So I'm being very cautious. I'm not being demanding. I suggest that the easiest way to do this is you will adapt it to your style. After a while, if you're working with someone, you'll be on the right wavelength with them, and they'll be so automatic, the two of you talking, that as their fear diminishes, you can diminish the exaggerated parts of this. But the minute they hit something that triggers them, go back to soft, slow, and lots of choices for them. Now, the thing to understand how reparative giving them choices is no one in their life up till this moment in time has made what they want or might want figural during interpersonal interactions. I will bet on that.
Claro, sus preguntas han sido tan ricas y tan amplias que ha respondido casi todas mis preguntas. Ahora, quiero terminar con una, y es, ¿qué le ha enseñado su trabajo clínico con personas esquizoides acerca de la naturaleza del contacto y la soledad?
Oh, it's taught me that that loneliness, as someone who was closer to the borderline end because I had been abandoned, and loneliness was what I felt, a deep-seated loneliness when I was alone in hotel rooms, like in between presentations. And for me, I like being with people. I've been married to or in a committed relationship most of my life with different people. So for me, my loneliness as a child manifested in my not wanting loneliness. Now I can be by myself because most of the day I'm writing by myself. My ideal man, I used to say, was a vampire. He didn't come till late at night. The sex was going to be great. He's a vampire, after all. And he's going to leave before dawn, so I don't have to worry about making him breakfast, or in the morning I can go back to work. It's enough contact. That's very schizoid-like. But so what I learned was there were people who thought that that state was the best they could hope for in life, to be alone and to have a rich fantasy life and to have very, very limited contact with other people because other people were so dangerous. So other people to me was so desirable, but to my schizoid clients, they weren't. So I had to turn what I would think 180 degree over in order to get into their head and see it from their point of view. Otra cosa. My schizoid clients sometimes had such trouble connecting. They had been disconnected for so long that they suffered from a very special kind of loneliness that was not good for them. Existential dread. This is a theme of many science fiction stories and many dreams. Chapter 13 in my book, there's 2 chapters in which I go into schizoid, only 2, because I was waiting for a schizoid person who is a therapist to write this book. And I said, well, I guess I got to do it, even though I'm not schizoid. So in chapter 3, differential diagnosis, less on schizoid. Chapter 13, schizoid dreams I collected for 35, 40 years. The themes of what's the difference between almost ready to connect, never ready to connect, all connection is potentially dangerous, or I've been so unconnected for so long, I have this dread that I will die alone in space, screaming, and no one will hear me. That I can't reconnect with anyone ever again. That's existential dread. It's a living death. I'm in this body. It's like being trapped in one of those comas where you can hear and you're alive, but people don't know you're in there. They're in a robot body. They're letting themselves be used for the rest of their life. I have clients like this, where they've made themselves the servant of whoever is in their relationship, or they're just waiting for death because they're dissociated from all good feelings. They're dissociated from people, and something's happened that interfered with their ability to make even the most minimal connections. And sometimes they come into therapy in that state because it's so scary. It's scary enough to get a schizoid in therapy. If they believe in therapy. So.
A ver, creo que ha sido un encuentro muy rico, porque con solamente 1, 2 o 3 preguntas que hizo, pudo abarcar la cantidad de preguntas que tenía para usted. Así que está siendo un honor para mí poder recibir toda su maestría a través de este encuentro. Así que estoy total y profundamente agradecido con usted.
Thank you. Muchas gracias. I love it. You want to be friends? Both of you. You have such a lovely smile, too. Well, please tell Danny that I'd be delighted to do other things with you if you want to hear more on the others a different time.
Claro que sí. Se nota mucho su pasión sobre este tema y sé que podemos seguir hablando por horas. Pero gracias por este pedacito de tiempo que nos ilustra muchísimo sobre los trastornos de personalidad y por supuesto la adaptación esquizoide. Así que un fuerte abrazo desde Colombia, un muy, muy grande abrazo. Gracias por todo.
As I said, I have yo hablo español poquito, so I get some palabras. It's many years since I was around Spanish-speaking people, but I love it. I would love to go to Colombia.
Bueno, bienvenida por acá. Un gran abrazo. Cuídese mucho. Gracias por todo.
To both of you. This is wonderful. I am so happy. I feel so warm, like I have new friends. Okay.